how dangerous Ukraine will be for Americans in the future. Because if you think about it, the Russians can't be, the ethnic Russian people in Ukraine can't be happy with America. I mean, we instigated this war, we've been fueling it and supporting it, and they've been devastated over the past 10 years. And then the western part of Ukraine, they're going to feel like you threw us into this, you got all of our people killed, and then you just abandoned us. And so I'm just thinking, even if we did do a mineral deal and we just come marching in and be like, all right, hey guys, you guys done fighting? We're going to just start taking your resources now.
Right.
It just seems like a dangerous situation, dangerous place. I mean, our fingerprints are all over this, and it's an absolute disaster on both sides. So, well, yeah, what do you think? Is it going to be pretty scary? I mean, are we going to see a lot of resentment, and can that manifest into other things?
Well, again, it's just that Ukraine is so weak that it's not going to present a military threat to the U.S. or certainly will be so weakened by that point. But we may have potentially a terrorist threat. Again, think of what happened in Afghanistan. We supported the Mujahideen then. I remember that. The Mujahideen were great heroes that were going to bring down the Soviet Union. And we armed them to the teeth. Osama bin Laden became involved in that, and we worked with him. And then we know how that ended. And there's a possibility that we'll see something similar. That we've been flooding Ukraine with arms. A lot of those arms are going to the front, but not all of them. I think everybody admits that a certain fraction, I don't know how large, has been diverted onto the black market. And then you have these ultranationalists within Ukraine that, of course, are willing to take U.S. arms, but really have no love for the U.S. or even for Western Europe. And then if in the end, it ends in disaster, as it almost certainly will for Ukraine, you have these angry people who are angry and violent people that are well armed. They can't really form an army that will be a threat to Europe as a whole, or to NATO or anything, but we could see terrorist attacks. I mean, there's so many weapons that have been dumped in there. So not just small arms, but we're talking about man pads, anti-aircraft missiles, things that could bring down an airliner, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's scary. In a previous episode, we talked about just who's really at fault for this war. And you did a great job explaining just the history. And then ultimately you said, who's to blame for this? It's quite easy. It's the United States. And I'm wondering, when this is all said and done, will there be that recognition? Will this war be blamed on the United States? And if it is, I'm just thinking, how do we handle this? Do we accept responsibility and learn from it and have a rebirth? I think that's really the only place moving forward. But if we refuse to accept responsibility, do we end up dying in shame, basically, this country? Instead of saying, like, this was wrong, we are changing direction, that America is dead. We have a new America, a new foreign policy, one that is not meddling in foreign affairs, not provoking wars around the world. We're here as a true peaceful nation. That's our mission. Do you think that's possible? How will this end?
Yeah, well, it's not. We have already seen some small steps in that direction. Again, the interview of Marco Rubio with Megyn Kelly, he did say things like that. For example, he said we need to start doing diplomacy again. That is a recognition that we really had gone down the wrong path. It wasn't just the previous administration, but it was something, I think, clearly that flew out of that resulted from the unipolar moment. And Marco Rubio in that talk, very intelligently recognized that truth. And so, we are seeing some recognition. It's partial, it's imperfect. Again, with Trump, you get, you get both. Just like on the one hand, he says, we need to be friends with the Russians. This is a stupid war, this kind of thing. And then there's all this boasting about American power, and sometimes an implication that, we'll apply the screws. I haven't heard that so much recently, but we did hear that earlier. Maybe he's abandoned that kind of thinking. But uh, but one thing you don't really see or hear rather from Trump is a recognition of the American role. He tends to put it on Zelensky and the Ukrainians. That's how he's been doing it. And it's just like, oh, they started the war. He actually did say that about Zelensky. Um, and but there is a denial of the American role. Not a complete denial. Okay, let's be honest. I mean, because again, Trump has at one point has said that, yeah, it was the expansion eastward was what provoked it, and that is kind of at least an indirect acceptance of American responsibility because the Americans led that expansion. They even pushed the Europeans, like the Western Europeans, to accept it when they were more resistant. So we do see some movement in that direction, and there could be that recognition. It could be um, more, maybe a little bit more coherently set forth and comprehensively stated. But we are getting little bits and pieces, admissions here and there that, yeah, okay, we were responsible.
Do you think an admission of responsibility from the United States, at least to some extent, explaining our role in this conflict, is necessary to heal and end this conflict for good?
Well, I don't know if it's I don't know if it's necessary, but I think it would be helpful. Not just for this conflict, but for potential future conflicts. I think there has to be a thorough rethinking, and I think again we are seeing the beginnings of that. If But we've talked about the importance of changing the narrative, and we are starting to see that. Let's say at least holes have been punched in the narrative. There's a counter narrative that's starting to arise, and that it at least is gaining traction, at least like within Red America. Um, but there's a ways to go before we really change the narrative fundamentally. But if we can do that, I think, yeah, the world will be just a safer place, and we'll all benefit. America above all, if we can give up the dream of global domination, we'll all be better off.
Right. I feel like it's important because if you don't do this and you just put all the blame on Ukraine,
Right.
it's unjust. It's not fair.
Yeah, no, it is.
And they know that, and that can lead to this lingering resentment, which could manifest into something awful in the future. I'm thinking it's not really comparable, but like in World War One, after the Treaty of Versailles, putting everything on Germany wasn't fair, and
Right.
it ended up, destroying them completely economically, and then we know what happened. So, like, I don't know if it's in our nature though to be able to apologize for what we've done, but I think it's very important to do, but I
Uh-huh.
just this conflicts directly with Trump's character. He's not
Yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
a beacon of humility. Um,
Right. Right.
so that's something that concerns me. I do feel
Yeah.
like it's
I mean,
important that.
it seems like he could frame it in a way that makes him look great, and that would at least admit American guilt, at least partially. It wouldn't be a complete admission, but he could, emphasize that it was Biden who got us into this war. This was really stupid, and he said things like that, and it was Biden's fault. It was Boris Johnson's fault. Uh, that might be harder for him to do because I think Boris Johnson and Trump actually have friendly relations, but he could make that argument very forcefully. But I think like the mineral agreement would be a real sore point. Just imagine yourself. Yeah, I think it's important to put yourself in the shoes of a Ukrainian. We were led down this path. It's been an utter disaster, and we're led down it, in no small part by the U.S. and Great Britain. And here we are. Our country is in ruins. We've lost a huge chunk of territory. And what is the U.S. doing for us? They're taking 50% of our resource wealth. If in fact the mineral agreement if it is concluded and implemented. Well, you can imagine the rage. It would be similar, you're right, to what the Germans experienced, in the Weimar Republic in the years following the end of World War One. And that rage had the consequences that we well know. Who knows? I don't see Ukraine becoming a great power like Germany was, but who knows what the future, there could be potential alliances between the Western Ukraine and the Baltics. I know the Baltics by themselves don't imagine anything amount to much, but maybe Poland too. Who knows? In any case, it would be a festering sore that Ukraine would be that would not only present a problem to Russia, which we've talked about earlier, but I think you're right. It would present a problem to all the West. Maybe it would just be support for terrorism, but it could develop into something more. Who knows? History, is full of surprises.
Right. It is a fear I have that if you leave that long festering wound of that injustice, it can manifest into something real nasty in the future. So I hope you're right. Trump has the opportunity to package it into his golden age deal. Like this is the new age. Right. That old era is over. That was Biden's era. That was the neocon era. Now we're entering in the era where we don't do this type of thing. Yeah. We don't.
Right. Well, remember, it's like what really you can say just wedded Western Europe to the U.S. Was U.S. support for Western Europe after the end of World War II. The Marshall Plan, those kind of things. But he's got the opposite of a Marshall Plan right now for Ukraine. It's kind of an anti-Marshall Plan. We're not giving you anything, we're taking from you. But he really, I think actually the U.S. has a moral responsibility to do this, and all of Europe that has supported Ukraine in this war effort. They say, okay, look, let's admit defeat, and we admit our own responsibility in bringing this about, and it really is our job to reconstruct or help to reconstruct Western Ukraine. And of course, Russia will be working on, and it already is, making great progress in reconstructing what was Eastern Ukraine.
Do you think that will ever happen?
Probably not. You just don't see any signs of it. It's just, there has been some talk of that in Europe. You don't hear a lot of it. Right now, you're hearing talk about, creating some sort of great EU military. But I think that's all hot air.
Yeah, we really chewed up and spat out Ukraine, and then we're going to leave them to hang out and dry. And
a lot of angry people with a lot of weapons, and a lot of angry, violent people with lots of weapons, and who have scores to settle. That's a dangerous situation. You're right.
Right. Yeah, I think it's something that people haven't really thought about. I am a bit worried about the future if we don't accept our responsibility in this. And when this is all said and done, just think how you would feel if you lost your brother in the war. It's like and you put the blame on America. You lose family members. Your son died, or your father, or something like this. It's just, it's awful. So I don't want to. I think people need to kind of remember just how horrible war is. We just look at it on numbers. Yeah. No, we start cheering for one team or the other. It's awful for everybody, and a lot of it's our fault.
Guys, thanks for listening. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And if you haven't checked it out yet, please check out my website, nobliski.io. You can look at the pinned comment below. It's something that I think you'll find useful. Even my dad uses it. My wife uses it. Instead of Googling things, you should be using this website because you get access to OpenAI, Perplexity, Anthropic, DeepSeek. There's hundreds of models that you can use. It's what I use to create the thumbnail images, things like this. And the greatest thing about it is there's no rate limits. There are no subscription fees. It's free to try out and use. You get free tokens every day. So if you're not a heavy AI user, you will never have to pay for anything. But this is really my passion project. I really want to get it off the ground, and I think you guys would like it. So yeah, check it out. Let me know what you think. And if you have time to download the apps and give it 5 stars, that'd mean a lot to me as well. Thanks a lot.